I just wanted to make you guys a quick video to review how you can create the drop-down menu. Some of you I know struggled with this a little bit, so I just thought I would make a video and show you how you should have coded your CSS so that you could get the drop-down menu to work in the way as I specified in our assignment settings. Remember that the drop-down menu, once you code it up, you should have it on every single page. So all of the pages should contain the drop-down menu, and all of the pages should also have our revised footer and our turtle up here in the upper right-hand corner. Here's the page, and everything is coded up in the way that we want it to be except for the drop-down menu. So I'm going to show you how I would implement this and incorporate it into my page. I gave you guys the HTML code for the menu, so if you just copy this from the provided file and paste it into your HTML file, you'll be all ready to go with the HTML. I'm going to jump into brackets so I can show this to you. So I already have the HTML code inside of my file. I commented it out, so I'm just going to uncomment it so that I can use it. And I already made changes to the links so that they're pointing to the appropriate pages when they can. And for this assignment, as I specified, you guys only needed to make the turtle, shark, fish gallery and contact us links live because those are the pages that we had built in the website. So now that I have the HTML as part of my page, if we were to look in the browser, our page is going to look like this. So clearly the menu is not working in the way that we want, and that's because so far we don't have any CSS. So any styles that are being applied are just things that it's inheriting from the previous styles that we had made. So I'm going to show you what I did with the CSS so that I could get the drop-down menu to work in the way that we want it to work. I'll go back into brackets. I'm going to go into my CSS file, and I'll just put the menu files all the way down at the bottom so that you can easily see them. And I'm just going to throw some returns in here. So this brings my page a little bit higher up. I will add a CSS-based comment that just specifies that this is going to be the navigation, the drop-down menu. And it's worth pointing out that because we're using XHTML in this project, I'm not using the HTML5 nav tag. I just gave an ID value of navigation to the UL so I could target specifically this UL and not affect other unordered lists that might be using. The other thing I want to point out is that you'll notice that I have the UL. The UL wraps around the entire menu, and then obviously it's going to have list items inside it. It is worth noticing that any list item that has a sub menu, so here's the About SDSL has a sub menu. Notice that the closing LI tag needs to wrap around the UL tag. So the nested UL is going to be inside of the LI tag. That becomes its parent. And that's an important distinction as we create our CSS because this will help us to style it in the appropriate way. Okay, so back into the CSS file. The first thing that I'm going to do here is I'm going to target my navigation. So I'm going to use hash navigation, and remember that is the name of our UL, and we're going to tell it to have a list style type of none. That'll remove the bullets from our menu. So we're going to do that. And then I'm just going to set my padding to 0, and I'll use the shorthand notation and just specify padding all the way around. I'm going to use shorthand notation again, and I'm going to set the margin on the top and the bottom to 0, and I'm going to set it to 20 pixels on the right and the left. And then we're going to specify that the font size be 14 pixels. So this is going to be a universal change. If I save and we look in the browser, you can see that those styles are now going to be applied to my file here. Now, because I only targeted the navigation, which is the first UL, it's not getting our children ULs. You can see how I have a big gap in between the first dropdown and the second dropdown. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a group selector, and I'm going to target not only navigation, but also navigation UL. This is a descendant selector, and it's going to get the unordered list that is a child of that UL with the name of navigation. And that's going to just ensure that everything has consistent style in here. Now what we're going to do is we're going to target the navigation LI items. So again, I'm going to use hash navigation. We're going to do LI, so this is going to get all of the list items. And in this particular project, I'm setting the width to 150 pixels. I need to do that so that my navigation items have a specific width assigned to them. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to specify that we use float left. This will allow the menu items to be side by side. I'm going to use shorthand notation and apply some margin settings to the UL. So we'll use 6 pixels for the top, 15 pixels for the right. I'm going to use 20 pixels for the bottom and 0 for the left. And then I'm going to specify the background color. And I provided the hex value for the background color for you guys. This is going to give us that dark blue shade that we want to use. I'm going to set the border all the way around to be solid, 1 pixel, and the color that I'm using is CCC, which is a light gray color. And I'm also going to use text align center, so this will simply align the text to the center. So if we save and we refresh our page, you can now see how the page looks like this. Now obviously a lot of things are wrong, but we're not done yet. So let's go ahead and let's create some rules so that we can actually see the text. I want to target the links, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use navigation, hash navigation A. So this will allow me to get my links. And we're going to specify that we want the link color to be white. I'm going to use padding of 6 pixels all the way around. I'm going to remove the underline by setting the text decoration to none. I'm going to set my font weight to bold. Now let me just show you something. If I save this and we refresh, we'll now be able to see the links. But because these are going to be a menu item, and because I want to make the buttons a little bit bigger, currently when I hover over the text, only the text is a link. And that's because links by default are inline elements. I want to be able to hover over any of this blue area that is technically going to be the button and have it act as a button. So to do that, I'm going to need to change the display of the links. So I'm going to have them display as block level elements. And when I do this, if we save and refresh, you're going to see that the links now are going to render the padding that I specified, and also I don't have to be right on the text. I can just be anywhere inside this button. So that's definitely something important that you want to incorporate into a button link. The next thing that we're going to do is we want to style our navigation drop down. Now ultimately we don't want any of the sub menu items to be showing until the user hovers over. But when I'm building the menu, I like to kind of get it all organized and styled before I actually add in that behavior, because I just feel like it's easier to be able to see what it is that I'm doing. So I'm not going to do that right away. And I'll point out when I do, but I'm going to make a new rule, and this is going to be for my navigation LI items. So this is getting the second tier LI items. It's going to miss the first tier. And what we're going to do is we're going to set the margin on these guys to be 0. So I'm overriding the rule that I made up here on the margin. I'm just setting the margin for the nested LIs to be 0 all the way around. And we're also going to remove the border on the top. So I'll set the border top to none. And again, that's something that these are going to, oops, I just realized I had a misspelling right there. That's something that these would inherit from the border that we had specified on the LI. So if we save now and refresh, it's going to get rid of those lines that would appear on the top, which we don't actually need. So I'm just removing those from the menu. Now, we want to get the menu to be aligned right underneath the top tier navigation items. So to do that, we're going to use some position. So I'm going to go into the navigation LI, which we already have a rule there, and we're going to add position relative. And remember that position relative by itself, it doesn't do anything. It's not going to affect any of the menu items at all. So nothing changes right there. But by doing this, we can then use a selector that allows us to target our navigation UL items. So on the navigation UL, I'm going to use position absolute, and this will allow me to control its position based on its relative parent. And we're going to set the top to 100%. If we refresh and look in the browser, you can see the position of these items. Now, currently the sub-navigation is indented. I don't want it to be there. And the indentation is because of a margin setting that's being inherited. Remember, on the navigation UL, I put a margin on the right and the left of 20 pixels. So let's set our margin setting to 0, and that should take care of the indentation. Now, there is a slight 1 pixel indent. That's because of the border, and the border is on the outside of the box. So to be able to get rid of that or eliminate that, I'm going to use a left position of -1 pixel, and that'll just pull the menu over by 1 pixel. So now those things align perfectly. So this looks great for my drop-down menu underneath the top tier item. These are all aligned in the way that we want. Now, the other thing that's probably a good idea to do when you're building a menu is to implement some z-index, just in case there's some other absolutely positioned items. We want to make sure that our z-index is going to take these items in front of everything else. So I'm just going to set the z-index to like 20, just to ensure that these elements are going to be in the front. And I think our menu will look nice if we have a little separator just on the top of the ULs. So I'm going to add a border top, and we're going to make it solid 1 pixel, and we'll use our CCC color. So this is just going to add a little line in between those UL items. So that looks great right there. And now, before we actually hide these items, let's position our third tier navigation. So in order to target this, I am going to use hash navigation, and we'll use UL. So that's going to ensure that it's going down 2 levels of unordered list. And we might just want to add a little comment that is third tier navigation, just so we can remember what's going on right here. And for the third tier navigation, I'm going to use position absolute. We are going to put the top at 0% this time. So I wanted to add 0% because remember, I want to pull these third tier menus up. So you can see when I click refresh, this actually now is California is sitting right on top of the volunteer text. So we don't want that to happen. We're going to have to push it over as well. So we're going to set the top to 0%, and we're going to set the left to 100%. And when we do that, it's going to push them so that they're all the way over to the right. Now, currently they're appearing underneath the creatures drop-down menu. That's never going to be an issue since these menus will never be open at the same time. We just see that now because we have all the menus open. And if you look closely, you'll actually see that the top of this is pushed down 1 pixel. It's because of that border. So instead of using a top of 0%, I'm going to actually change this and use -1, just like we did on the left position up above. And this will just allow the menu just to pull up by 1 pixel, so these align perfectly like that. So now I have the menus in the position. Now I need to add in the CSS to have them be hidden and display only when I want them to display. So what we're going to use here is we're going to go back up to our rule that we have for navigation UL, and I'm going to change the display to none. So that's simply going to hide the menus so we don't see them from view anymore. And then what we're going to need to do is we need to tell them to display. So we're going to use a CSS selector that will allow that to happen. I'm going to use hash navigation li colon hover. So I'm using our pseudo class of hover on the li element. And then I'm going to use the greater than symbol and ul. And what this is this is getting the direct descendant of the li, which in this case is the ul, because remember those uls are nested inside the li. And I'm just going to tell the ul to have a display of block. So if we save our page and we refresh, now when I hover over, the menus are going to show, but only when I'm hovering over. So that looks great. And the couple of last things we need to do is we just need to change some of our color a little bit. So I'm going to use a rule on my hover state of my navigation items, and I'm just going to come up here to my navigation li, and I'll make a rule for navigation li hover, and we're going to change the background color to be 333. So now when we hover over the menu items, they're going to turn to our darker color, which I like, and now this would be working. And if these were actual links, we could click and go places. On my creature page, if I click on the shark page, it's going to take me to the shark page, and you can see that I already added the HTML so that the menu appeared on all of my other pages, which is what I want. The menu should be everywhere. So the last problem that we need to resolve is the fact that this text is coming up to the right side of the menu. So let's go ahead and let's just sort that out. And what we need to have happen here is we need to insert a clear into our navigation, because this text is floating up to the right because of the float that we applied when we built our menu. So remember that we used a float of left on the navigation li. So you have two choices in regards to how to clear this. You could go ahead and you could go after the ul, and we could add a div and put a class of clear it on the div, and we don't even need anything in the div. And we have a class that we already made of clear it. So if we refresh, that's going to take care of that. And now the text no longer is going to appear in that area. Now, the reason that it's not working on my internal pages is because I would have to go into the HTML and add that div with the class of clear it on all of those other pages. So this is a total valid way of creating that clear. I am going to show you one other way that is a little bit more flexible because we won't have to edit our HTML. So I'm just going to get rid of that div. I'll go back to my CSS, and what we're going to do here is we're going to add a rule of navigation colon after. So this is a pseudo class selector, and this one is going to allow us to kind of have a clear fix without having to add any HTML. So I'm going to use the content property, and I'm going to set the content just to empty quotes. So I'm saying that I'm not going to insert any content, and I'm going to use a clear of both, and then I'm going to tell this to display as a block level element. And if we save now and we go back and we refresh, you can see that the page looks exactly the same. But if I go to any of those other pages, we don't have the text wrapping up to the right of the menu. So I didn't have to add any extra HTML to be able to accomplish that. So that's kind of a good handy trick that you can use to insert on your menu. And needless to say, that's all you really need to do to get the menu to work, and you have a beautiful drop-down menu, and you can just continue to add as many flyout elements as you need to using the CSS only based menu.